Breaking news, Hurricane Irma envelops Florida. The deadly storm plows through the state with wind gusts topping 140 miles an hour.
The impacts of this storm still being felt for 415 miles.
You also have the crops. Florida is a place where we get orange juice from.
Lost the majority of this year's crop. We've been cut in half on a production level because of disease. This cuts that half in half.
This past September, Hurricane Irma set a world record. It was the longest, strongest in history. And the face of Florida agriculture, citrus, was hit super hard. $760 million in estimated damage. And even before the storm hit, citrus wasn't doing well. The industry was already down from 242 million boxes in 2004 to 72 million in 2016. Florida's oranges and its delicious juice that we all love so much have been fighting a much slower moving disaster that I've been covering for over the past year. Here in Central Florida, I mean, it's a staple. Citrus is a staple. Oranges in general, not just for your company, but well beyond that.
It is the economic engine that drives this area. Concentrate was developed here in Florida, and that really spawned a juice industry.
For the sweet, fresh flavor.
It became so popular, it was on everybody's table.
I'm Flora the Florida orange, and I'm loaded with vitamin C.
That's why you need a second glass during the day.
But the industry certainly has evolved. It's kind of an integrated operation from the grove all the way to the glass, if you will. You know, during this part of the season where we're receiving fresh fruit, a good portion of the fresh fruit is going straight to the carton or the bottle. We get rid of the culls here at the grading table, and then it goes through the sampling device, and then the extractors squeeze the fruit. The juice will be conveyed over to the packaging area where it will be pasteurized before it goes into the carton.
My favorite part. It takes more than 2 oranges to produce a single 8-ounce glass of Florida's natural orange juice, and every one of those oranges comes from a small blossom.
Well, you can see here that this one, you can see the little piece of fruit that's developing here from the bloom right in the center. And not all of these will develop that piece of fruit, and in some cases that little piece of fruit will drop off. Oranges originally came over with the Spanish, and the original industry was really in North Florida. The freezes in the late 1800s, 1890s, are really what pushed the industry south and moved on down the state. We had the freezes in the 80s, so we lost 70% of the production in this area. These trees were all replanted after the 89 freeze.
Prior to 1980, the number of freeze-free years were only 11. From 1980 until now, there have been 14 freeze-free years, so much fewer freezes, basically.
Yes.
So that's positive in general, I imagine, for fruit growing.
We're glad not to have the freezes.
But you like cool.
We like cold weather. Yeah. The citrus tree does require a certain amount of chilling hours to set a crop of fruit.
Since those epic freezes in the 80s, the enemy of the Florida orange is now a tiny bug.
They're pretty small. Hopefully if I find one, I can point it out.
Yeah.
We found citrus greening in Florida in 2005.
Citrus greening, also known as yellow dragon disease, isn't just a problem in the U.S. It's been mutilating crops in China, India, and South Africa for more than a century. It wasn't found in Brazil until 2004, and then a year later, it was found in Florida. The bug itself is just transporting the disease, right?
Correct. There's a small insect called the Asian citrus psyllid. That insect actually carries a bacterium. And so when the psyllid flies to a tree, it's got needle-like mouth parts, puts them into the leaf, and it injects that bacteria into the tree. So the bacteria, as we now know, goes down to the roots, starts killing off the root system, and then starts working its way back up and causing, the above ground effects, the dieback of the tree. Yeah. And one of the symptoms that growers often will see, the first signs, when the leaves get this, what they call a mottled appearance. The leaves not uniform green, and then you can see these fruit are really small, and they're staying green. I mean, these should be ready to pick, and they're not usable. And so before you see the first above ground symptom, like a blotchy mottle leaf, you've actually lost 30 or 40% of the root system below ground.
Wow.
And so when you get these dry periods, these drought periods, that really stresses the tree even more. You'll start to see the fruit dropping off the trees like behind you. You see all the fruit on the ground under that tree.
And this is happening all over the state of Florida.
Yes, it is. It's having a major impact. And we have a lot of growers who are having to make decisions daily. Are they going to be able to stay in business?
The fruit that's coming in right now for juice is Valencia oranges. Now the colloquial pronunciation of Valencia is Valencia.
Okay.
They're their primary juice orange. They're a lot more productive as far as juice content, but they've got it too.
It, meaning the greening. A third-generation citrus farmer, Scott Young's groves have been ravaged by the disease.
I went from 400 acres down to less than 100.
And when you had to sell, that had to be heartbreaking too.
Absolutely. It's just like losing a child to me. They all have it.
They all have it.
Some of them are just not as far along, but everything in here's got it badly. You've got this real green fruit, this immature, growing on the same limb with mature fruit. This is a real problem for harvesting because this is not supposed to be here. This twig damage here is all part of the disease because there's nothing that's out there to feed it.
It's just dead.
It's just dead. And the other thing is it makes the fruit fall on the ground.
Right.
So 30 days before the fruit's ripe, 35–40% of your crop will just fall on the ground while you're waiting for maturity. And it's just one of those things you thought I was going to make it this year, but it dropped on the ground again. This is the bad thing about citrus. It takes 7 years before you can hope for a profit off a tree, and that was before greening. Now, you're basically, you're buying a pig in a poke. Do you replant and hope for the best? Can you replant and hope for the best? Or, are you going to stay in it, or are you going to take another form of agriculture, or are you going to sell it to developers? This is my home. I was basically born here, and this was a thriving, beautiful grove 4 years ago. I'm talking about, this is the best citrus land in the world still, but you got a pest that they can't overcome.
But Rogers and his team are dedicated to finding a solution to that pest. The idea is to develop a resistant rootstock. In the meantime, the University of Florida has developed a physical barrier. It's a form of citrus security.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Just run the ramp there.
Yes, so this is Screenhouse.
A screenhouse, not a greenhouse. The only way to avoid the greening disease.
It limits the size of the insect that can move through it, and so it excludes completely the psyllid. I call it an interim solution. So
Until you figure it out?
because we are searching for a less costly solution that will hopefully allow us to grow the trees outdoors. But right now, this is the only option that I know of that works.
So how many trees again are in here?
The Screenhouse prototype here has about 1,000 trees. And what you're looking at right here is a density of planting of about 1,360 trees per acre.
Wow. Which is much
substantially more than commercial outdoor, conventional citrus production.
Seeing the greening disease come in and take out large percentages of farms, having people quit and give up, it must be very upsetting for folks around here.
Very, yeah. It's a slow-moving disaster. I hate to say, but that's what it is. But we're all working on it really hard.
And they have to. Citrus is key to Florida's economy, making the state $8.6 billion each year. So how does one stay hopeful and survive while losing more than half of their crops statewide in a little over a decade?
We're close to some solutions. I would just like for them to stop telling me it's 3 to 5 years out. I'd like to give me something that I can go to the grove with tomorrow.
There's no silver bullet as I see it out there. You're not going to invent some chemical that's going to cure it. It's going to be resistant rootstock.
And right now, while we don't have the ultimate solution, we have developed the short-term fixes. Because if you asked us in 2005, what's the status of the industry, everybody would have said, well, in 10 years, the Florida industry will be gone. Well, we're 12 years, we're still going, because we've learned how to manage the trees and keep them productive longer. We're really close to having new varieties that are resistant to the disease. It's really just a matter of time.
Something we point out is between the wet times and the dry times and the hurricanes and the freezes and also then the citrus canker, citrus greening, it seems like there's, in nature, there's always something to deal with. It's part of agriculture.
And part of agriculture is always the weather, as Hurricane Irma reminded us this year.
Hurricane Irma did damage the Screenhouse, but the tears and the rips have now been repaired. The storm hit Scott Young's farm hard, blowing off at least 75% of what was already a small crop. Florida's Natural says they don't even know how bad it was. They're still working with their growers to determine the full impact of that storm on its business.